Good morning to everyone. Now in this presentation, we are going to discuss about the Indian Boiler Regulation Act 1950. So in this Indian Boiler Regulation Act 1950, which is amended in 2011, and the main reference is the Boiler Act 1923. So when we are talking about Boiler Act or regulation, we know we can imagine the different types of boilers and their types, their mounting, accessories, functions, working, etc. So first of all, those who are not knowing about this boiler, you should know this is the equipment which is going to be used for generating the steam. So the main or the primary purpose of the boiler is to generate the steam, right? So there may be a fire tube boiler, there may be a water tube boiler, and there may be a different mounting and accessories mounted or attached to the boiler depending on the applications. So when we are running these boilers, the main factors related to safety are the pressure, that is working pressure, design pressure, then the temperatures, because we are generating the steam, it means we need high temperatures. So the temperature is another parameter. Then the different types of tubes, then some assemblies, some fittings, furnaces, construction work, material of construction, controlling panel, then walls like safety wall, that may be dead weight safety wall, lever safety wall, or ram's bottom safety wall, then level indicators, then the valves for operating the water inlet and outlet nozzles, then steam outlet nozzles, stream distributions, then we have to maintain the water level and the steam level, etc. So all these things should be considered while operating these boilers. Now we must know how to get the sanctioning of these boilers, that is called as certification. Who is going to certify your boiler? What exactly the conditions are? So we have to discuss each and everything through the rules. So this Indian Boiler Rule 1950, which is amended in 2011, the main reference is section 28A of the Boiler Act 1923. So with the reference of this section 28A Boiler Act 1923, these rules are designed by the central government. The chapter 1 is preliminary. So we know that the rule number 1 is always short title and commencement, that these rules may be called as Boiler Operation Engineers Rules 2011, and it is applicable to all from the publication date in the official gazette. Then rule number 2 is related to the definitions. So Act means Boiler Act 1923, Board means Board of Examiners constituted under these rules. Then Boiler Operation Engineer means a person granted with a certificate of proficiency as a boiler operation engineer under these rules. Then Chairman means the chairman of that board, which is constructed or structured under this rule. Chief Inspector means the assigned to it under clause C of Section 2 of Boiler Act 1923. So with reference to that Act, Section 2C, the Chief Inspector is going to assign. Then form means a form appended to these rules. Government means state government or administration of union territory. Secretary means secretary of that board. Section means the section of that act. Any reference in these rules to a boiler or boiler shall be deemed to include also a reference to an economizer or economizers. Now we must know what exactly the economizer is. So to increase the economy of a boiler, the equipment is called as economizer. So how to increase the economy of the boiler? So we have to use the waste heat, that is the energy from the boiler, that is the flue gases which are generated after the combustion in the furnace, and that waste gas can be used and should be used for heating something, and if that is the process, then that equipment is called as economizer. Then the rule number 3 is related to the supervision of operation of boilers. We have to supervise these operations which is related to the boiler operations. So the owner of a single boiler or two or more boilers connected in a battery, or of many separate individual boilers situated within a radius of 50 meters, having a total heating surface exceeding 1000 square meters, in any of the case shall not use the same or permit the same to be used unless the boiler or boiler are placed in a direct charge of a competent person specified in rule number 4, in addition to such number of boiler attendants as specified in these rules. So for operating these boilers, we need the boiler attendant, the boiler engineers, and with reference to the guidelines which is given by the competent person, we have to run these boilers. So while operating these boilers, some expert person should supervise these operations of boilers, because we have already discussed that these boilers are nothing but a bomb. Why it is called like that? Because the high pressure, high temperatures, and the steam vapor pressure is the major hazards in these boilers, and that is why if some mounting or accessories or some wrong is happen in the control panel, then that boiler can be explode. So while running these operations in the boiler, we have to supervise to control these things within a time. The chief inspector, the inspector, and the boiler attendant are the main key persons who are going to supervise these things, who are going to control the parameters under this boilers. So for that purpose, we can refer the boiler attendant rule 2011 for appointing these boiler attendants, what are their eligibility criteria and their qualification, experience, etc. Rule number 4 is related to the competent person shall possess certificate and extent of qualification. So no one can run the boiler, no one can operate the boiler unless and until the certificate for operating this boiler operation should be given by the competent person. Rule number 5 is related to the production of certificate. So how to get that certificate? What exactly the criteria for operating this boiler? It's all this given under this certification. So what exactly the design pressure, working pressure, temperature, viscosity, etc. All the parameters are given in that certificate. On that particular parameter, the boiler certificate is given. It means the permission to operate that boiler with respect to that parameter is given. Then rule number 6 is related to the owner to furnish chief inspector or director of boilers with particulars of certificates. The owner of boiler who engage any person to be in charge thereof shall within 7 days of such engagement furnish to the chief inspector or director of boilers with full particulars of such persons including the serial number, date and place of issue of his certificate to hold such. So all these things should be mentioned in that certificate after the permission of the director or chief inspector of the boilers. The owner of a boiler who engage any person to hold the charge of such boiler in place of a person who is in charge under sub rule 1 in the event of such person leaving his employment or in the event of death of such person, report that fact within the 7 days. So if the representative of that owner is going to operate this boiler, and in case of fatality or death of that particular person, then we have to report to the chief inspector or director of boilers within the 7 days. Then rule number 7 is related to the limits of daily period of attendance, reliefs and sphere of action. A person in charge of a boiler shall be deemed to be in direct and immediate charge of the same when he is within 100 meters of such boilers. So the in charge of that boiler is the responsible for all these things because he is going to observe each and everything which is related to the boiler, their mountings and accessories. A person in charge of a boiler for which a certificate of proficiency is required under these rules may be relieved of charge in any one day for not more than 2 periods which when combined do not exceed 2 hours in duration by a person holding a first class certificate of competency as a boiler attendant. So the in charge means who is going to operate, who is going to supervise and control the boiler operations needs the boiler attendant certificate, and for that purpose he should pass that boiler attendant criteria with first class. So the holder of first class certificate of competency as a boiler attendant may also, with the consent in writing of the chief inspector or director of boiler, relieve a person holding a certificate of proficiency as boiler operation engineer for a period which may extend to 10 consecutive days, which in special circumstances the chief inspector or director of boilers may extend to any length of time not exceeding 30 days at a time. So if the proficiency certificate is held by that boiler attendant, then he can communicate to the director or the chief inspector directly. Then rule number 8 is related to the when boiler shall be deemed to be in use. So the purpose of this rule is When it is when there is a fire, means a fire tube boiler. So in the furnace, firebox, or a fireplace for the purpose of heating the water in the boiler, or under banked fire condition, a boiler shall be deemed to be not in use only when the fire is removed and all the steam and water connection are closed. So if there is a fire in the boiler, means a fire tube boiler is there, that fire may be in the tubes, that may be under the particular assembly where the water can be converted into steam. Then an economizer or waste heat boiler shall be deemed to be used. We have already discussed that we are going to utilize the energy or the heat which is carried out by the flue gases. The flue gases are nothing but the gases which are generated after the combustion of the fuel in the furnaces. So this economizer or waste heat boiler can be utilized to increase the economy of a boiler by utilizing or using the waste heat which is generated or carried out by the flue gases. Then rule number 9 is related to the constitution of the board of examiners. So the operations, the certifications, etc. are the functions of the board, that is the board of boilers, and the board of examiners are the members of this board. A board of examiners shall be constituted for the state or union territory, consisting of chief inspector or director of boilers, a deputy chief inspector or inspector or equivalent as nominated by the chief inspector. So the main person is the chief inspector, and then director, then there may be a designation like deputy chief inspector or inspector. In some of the cases, if workload is more, if the number of cases are more or number of supervisions are more, then they can depute the representative of the board of examiners also. Normally for the main functioning, for the large boilers, the chief inspector or the directors are going to inspect all these things, and they can also have the rights to nominate the different person for the different purposes. Then rule number 10 is related to the term of office of the members. Other than the ex officio members of the board shall be 3 years. So the term or duration for these members are 3 years. So the members may be a state representative, state government representative, or union territory. So that is depends on the conditions. Then rule number 11 is related to the functions of the board. So the different functions of the boards are conduct examinations and practical tests of candidates for the grant of certificates of proficiency as a boiler operation engineer, have power to appoint any person as a paper setter or examiner at any examination, grant certificate of proficiency as a boiler operation engineer, and consider the reports of inquiries into allegations of drunkenness, negligence of duty, misconduct on the part of boiler operation engineers, etc. So these are the different functioning of the boards. The main function is to conduct the examinations, then to set the papers for these examinations. After examination, after passing the candidates, they can grant the certificate, and in case of any misconduct on the part of boiler operation, they can give the penalty or they can cancel the certification of proficiency. Then rule number 12 is related to the meeting of the board. So with reference to the chairman's guidelines, the meeting can be conducted and the place or the venue can be decided by the chairman only. Rule number 13 is related to the notice of meeting and list of businesses. So notice of not less than 15 days from the date of posting shall be given of the time and place fixed for each meeting of the board to every member. So before 15 days, we have to communicate the venue, the date, exact time of that meeting to all the members of this board of boilers. Then any business which is not on the list shall not be considered at the meeting except with the permission of chairman. So we have to decide what exactly the points to be discussed in that meeting, and only that points are going to discuss. In case of any urgent or 11th hour point to be discussed, so permission of the chairman is needed. Then rule number 14 is related to the quorum. The chairman or the secretary and two members of the board of examiners shall form a quorum. The chairman and secretary is compulsory, and then additional two members can be appointed by the chairman. That forms a quorum. Then rule number 15 is related to the chairman to preside at meetings of the boards. The chairman shall preside over the meetings of the board, and his absence, a member chosen by the member present at the meeting shall preside over the meeting. So in case of absenteeism of that chairman, a representative which is permitted by that chairman can conduct the meeting. Then rule number 16 is related to the secretary of the board. So after the chairman, secretary has many rights, who can maintain the register of boiler operation engineers, holding the certificate of proficiency, and shall perform such other functions as are specified in these rules. Then rule number 17 is related to the board's endorsement on applications. So the board shall endorse on the printed application form of each candidate the result of the examination for a certification of proficiency as a boiler operation engineers. The endorsed application shall be returned to the secretary. So secretary is going to keep the record of all these candidates, their certificate of proficiency as a boiler operation engineer, so that at a state level also they can have the number, the persons details, and who are having the boiler operation proficiency certificates. Then rule number 18 is related to the board's power to refuse issue of certificate. The board may direct any candidate who in the opinion of the majority of the members appears too old or physically unfit through deformity, constitutional weakness, defective eyesight, deafness, or loss of limb to perform efficiently the duties of boiler operation engineer to produce a certificate of fitness from a registered medical practitioner. So before operating the boiler, you must have this certificate of fitness which is given by the registered medical practitioner only. So in case of accident, in case of the oldness or physically unfit issues or some other issues, you have to procure this certificate of fitness from the registered medical practitioner. And after getting this certificate only, if the boiler inspector is going to permit you for operating this boiler as a boiler operation engineer, then and then only this process will be continued. Then rule number 19 is related to the examiner's fees. Now the fees criteria may be changed and is going to change year by year, because this is the data which is related to the 2011 amendment. So each member of the board of examiner and any other examiner appointed under rule 9 except chairman and secretary shall be entitled to receive fees for examining candidates under these rules. The rate of fees is like sitting fee for non-official board 500 rupees, members for board meeting, for setting question paper 300, for evaluation of answer paper 15, for examining each candidate 100, invigilation fee rupees 300 for invigilator if the exam exceeds 3 hours, 150 per invigilator if the examination does not exceed 3 hours. Then rule number 20 is related to the action of the boards. So no action of the board shall be deemed to be invalid by the reasons of any defect in the constitution of the board or any reason of such actions having been done during the period of any vacancy in the board. So up till this rule number 20, we have discussed about the preliminary criteria, rule number 1 and 2, then the definitions, then related to the board of examiners, etc. Now the chapter 4 is related to the examination. Rule number 21 is related to this examination. So we have to conduct this examination for the certificate of proficiency as a boiler operation engineer, and the notifications, the advertisement will be given by the secretary from time to time in the state or union territory region. Then rule number 22 is related to the postpone of the examination. So in case due to any circumstances, in case of any emergency, if the government is decided that the exam is going to postpone, then the secretary or the chairman should communicate to all the members, to all the candidates through various notification, through the advertisement or through the news or newspapers that this examination is postponed to particular date or for a particular time. Then rule number 23 is related to the capabilities of holders of certificate. The certificate of proficiency as a boiler operation engineer shall qualify the holder thereof to be in charge of a boiler or boilers of any type and size, provided that the boilers are so situated that none of them is at a distance of more than 50 meters radius from any one of them. So this is the main distance criteria, that is 50 meters radius from any one of them. Then the holder of certificate for all intents and purposes be deemed to have fulfilled the requirements with reference to the Boiler Attendants Rule 2011. So we have already discussed that boiler operation engineer, the certificate of proficiency, all the required qualifications should be clear. That is the first class certificate of that particular exam should be passed by that candidate. Then and then only the candidate is eligible for operating these boilers. Then rule number 24 is related to the endorsement on a certificate. So the person having this certificate endorse for validity in the state or union territory in which he applies for the services. So such endorsement shall be made by the chairman of the board. Then rule number 25 is related to the fees, that is 200 rupees shall be paid for the endorsement on the certificate, and that is not refundable. Then chapter 6 is related to the application for examination. So the candidates who are interested to get the certificate of proficiency for the boiler operation engineer, they can apply for the examination, and for that purpose we have to fill the form. So rule number 26 is related to the form of application. Every application for examination shall be in form A. The applicant shall be in such part of the form are to be filled by the candidates. Then the officer will verify all the details which is filled in that form by the candidates, and if it is correct, then the form is going to pass. Then different documents which are attested by the officer should be attached to that form. Some documents like testimonials of good character from his employer with a certificate of age, then a treasury challan, that is the fees is paid, that proof, then 2 copies of the recent passport size photograph. So all these things should be attached to that form or application. Then rule number 27 is related to the candidate to produce satisfactory testimonials. So whatever the candidates has filled the data in that form, whatever he has attached the documents, that should be examined by the officers. Then all these things are verified by the officers, and then only he is going to permitted for the examination. Candidates who have undergone a course of training at a recognized engineering college or technical institution must produce either the degree or diploma of the course or a certificate from the principal or the superintendent of the institution giving the period devoted in the completing the course. So the certificate or the training certificate should be produced whenever they ask, and it should be signed by the principal or the representative. Then other documents from the may be asked by that officers. So all the documents should be attested and signed by a responsible officer. Then rule number 28 is doubtful testimonials. In case if the officer is having a doubt on a particular document, on a particular sign or a duration, etc., then they can hold the documents, and if it is a wrong document, they can reject the application. Rule number 29 is related to the false testimonials. So we have discussed, in case of any false testimonials or the documents, then the officer is having the authority to reject that application for attending the examination. Then rule number 31 is related to the age, qualification and experience. A candidate for a certificate of proficiency as a boiler operation engineer shall not be less than 23 years of age and shall not be admitted to the examination unless he possesses a degree or diploma in mechanical, electrical or chemical or power plant or production or instrumentation engineering from a recognized institution. So age criteria is 23, then qualification criteria is the degree or diploma from these branches of engineering like mechanical, electrical, chemical, power plant, production, instrumentation, and has served for not less than 2 years in case of degree holders and for 5 years in case of diploma holders. So before attending this examination, before applying this examination, the candidate must have at least 2 years experience if he is degree holder and at least 5 years experience if he is a diploma holder. So these are the main age, qualification and experience criteria for the boiler operation engineers. Then rule number 32 under chapter 8, that is syllabus for examination. A candidate, in order to be qualified for a certificate of proficiency under this rule, shall inter alia satisfy the examiner that he can calculate loads, areas, volumes, quantities and weights. So indirectly the syllabus or curriculum part is the basic calculations like the loads, area, volume, quantities and weights, because these calculations are needed for calculating the volume of water, the volume of steam, then the weight of the fuel, that may be a volume of fuel because the fuel may be in solid form, that may be in liquid form, sometimes that may be in a gaseous form. So all the calculations which are related to the water, steam and fuel, that candidate is capable to calculate all these things. Then can give the description of the principal types of steam boilers used on the land and to state the purpose and the reasons for which different types of boilers are employed. And from the data and formula supplied, calculate the safe working pressure for any part of a boiler in accordance with the Indian boiler regulations. So candidate must have the knowledge regarding the types of boilers, that may be on the functioning, that may be on the fire, that may be on the application or use on the land, or that may be in the water or in other places. So all the knowledge should be possessed by the candidates. Then he or she should capable of calculating the safe working pressure of that particular boiler with reference to the Indian boiler regulations. Then can calculate the direct stress, the torsional stress and the bending stress in round bars and shafts, and the bending stress in a rectangular bars and levers with given loads. So the candidate should calculate all these types of stresses, because on the basis of these stresses we can judge, we can predict what can be happen in the next some hours, in the next month or in the near future. So depending on the working pressure, depending on the temperature, depending on the weather conditions or some parameters which can affect the life of that boiler, so all the stresses should be calculated. Understands the working and management of steam boilers, superheaters and economizers. So when we require the high pressure steams, then we need the superheaters. Normally we are operating the boilers and the main application of the steam is especially for the low pressure steam criteria or the medium pressure steam. In some of the cases we require the super heating or the superheated pressures or superheated steams, and for that purpose we require these superheaters. We discuss about the economizer. Understand the use and purpose of various valves. So there are various valves for operating the inlets, outlets or for other functionings. So that may be a gate valve, that may be a globe valve, that may be a butterfly valve, that may be a needle valve, etc. Then some cocks, some mountings, fittings and other safety devices. Then can give a description of land and explain the functions of feed pumps, feed injectors, feed regulators, feed water filters, softeners, feed heaters, air heaters, calorifiers, steam accumulators, forced draught, induced draught and automatic draught control devices. So there are various instruments which can control different parameters. So for calculating the efficiency of a boiler, we must know the calorific value of the fuel. Then for increasing the efficiency, we must know the parameters of the feed water. So for avoiding the corrosion issues, for avoiding the scaling issues, for avoiding the sludge issues, we must know the parameters of the feed water. So that may be pH, that may be DO, that may be COD, BOD, alkalinity, acidity, etc. So all these parameters and why these parameters should be controlled, what are their adverse effects on the boilers or the operations, all these things should be known to these candidates. Then some equipment like softener or water filter should be needed in some of the areas, especially where the hard water is used for the boiler, because in some of the places the hard water is available only, and that should be softened first and then only we have to provide in that boiler as a feed water. In some of the cases turbidity may be the issue, or in some of the cases suspended solids or dissolved solids may be the issue, and for that purpose again we have to use the different types of filters, and in some of the cases we have to use the reverse osmosis type of equipment to reduce the total dissolved solids, to remove the suspended solids, to remove some of the impurities which are present in the water. Then candidate can answer questions on fact relating to the combustion, heat, steam, calculate consumptions of coal and water and quantity of steam that may be generated from a given heating surface under the various streams of draught in any land boiler, and also calculate the overall efficiency of a boiler. So the candidate must have the knowledge about the combustion, what exactly the combustion is. It is nothing but a chemical reaction where we are burning the hydrocarbons with the help of oxygen and ignition source. So that carbon plus O2 that gives CO2, that is a complete combustion process. And if carbon plus half O2 that gives CO, then it is incomplete combustion process. So for having a good efficiency of that boiler, we must go for the complete combustion process, and for that purpose only we have to provide the excess air or the excess oxygens. So all these material balance calculation, heat balance calculation, what exactly the sensible heat is, what exactly the latent heat is, how to calculate the rate of heat transfer. Normally the formulas are mcp delta T for sensible, m lambda for latent heats. If there is a combination, then mcp delta T plus m lambda, and other formulas are also pro. So all these things should be known to that candidate before operating these boilers. Then can explain jet and surface condensation, reheating and the working of steam expansion, etc. So that candidate must have the knowledge about the condensation phenomena. So it is nothing but the conversion of vapors into liquids. Now we are using this steam. So this steam may convert into the condensate, that is in the liquid droplets or form. It is called as condensation. So there are various types of condensation and their functioning is different. Their controlling techniques are different. Then how to reheat a particular steam. So if it is a saturated steam or wet steam, then we have to reheat that particular steam again, and all these things should be known to that candidate. Then candidate can explain the general methods employed in the laying foundations for boilers and chimneys, and the suitable area and height of chimneys to promote efficient combustions. So there are some design parameters wherefrom we have to decide the height of that chimney for a particular complete combustion process to increase the efficiency of that boiler only. And there are different design parameters for other equipments also. Then it can explain the significance of principal appliances in use for the prevention of smoke. So smoke is nothing but a majority of the carbon contents, and we have to avoid this carbon because this smoke indicates the incomplete combustion process or after combustion process, the ash generation or the carbon generations. So we have to select appropriate fuel where the combustion can be a proper combustion where the complete combustion should be done and a clear combustion should be there so that we can avoid this carbon. Then the principle on which they work and give description of the principal: mechanical stokers, pulverizers, gas, oil, pulverizer, fuel systems in use. So for feeding these fuels, we have to apply these instruments for feeding techniques. So in some of the cases, we are going to use the coal as a fuel. In some of the cases, the wood as a fuel. In some of the cases, nowadays we are using the agricultural waste in terms of biobriquettes, etc. So for that purposes, for feeding these fuels, we need some instruments like conveyors, mechanical stokers, pulverizers, etc. In some of the boilers, we have to operate the boilers with the help of oil or gases, and then we can operate efficiently these equipments for getting the higher efficiency of that boiler. Then the candidate understands the need for periodical cleaning, the methods used for prevention of scale or other deposits on heating surfaces, and the necessary for maintaining a certain pH value of feed water. So we already discussed that different parameters should be studied, that is of feed water, because there may be a case of scaling, that may be a case of sludging, there may be a case of corrosion or some other issues. So for avoiding these issues for engineering problems, we have to check the different parameters of this feed water on a continuous basis, and we have to maintain a pH between 6.8 to 7.2, because this is the pH having value 7 is a neutral. So generally we are going to maintain the pH in between 6.8 to 7.2, and for that purpose we have to clean the different parts of that boilers periodically to avoid the scale or sludge formation, because this scale and sludge formation is nothing but the resistance for the heat transfer. So if the resistance of the heat transfer is more, then we have to apply more steam, we have to apply the more fuel, we have to burn or combust the more fuel, and that decreases the overall efficiency of the boiler. So we have to avoid this scale and sludge formation. For that purpose, periodical cleaning of that boiler is necessary. Can detect defects in boilers and state the means and methods of rectifying them. So we have to check, supervise the different defects if it is observed in the boiler, and then we have to rectify them. Understand the precautions to be taken for starting a boiler and economizer from cold or from bank fire conditions. Then understand the procedures to be adopted in putting an economizer out of commissions while the boiler is on steam. Can explain the methods adopted for the achievement of fuel economy and the use of various instruments used in the boiler house. The materials used in boiler components and piping. Can read the prepare working sketch and drawing of boilers and boiler mountings or parts thereof. So there are different parts which are can be called as fittings. Some are mountings, some are accessories, some are boiler components, some are connecting components, some are pipings, etc. So all these things should be taken care for and should be rectified the defects if it is observed in the supervision. So for good efficiency, we have to check each and every part of these boilers periodically. Then rule number 33 under this chapter 9, mode of examination, that is a nature of examination. So examination for certificate of proficiency as a boiler operation engineer shall be of such nature as to test the practical ability and technical knowledge of the candidates, because only theoretical knowledge is not sufficient for operating this boiler, and that is why the condition for boiler attendance examination is minimum 2 years experience after graduation and minimum 5 years experience after diploma. because in that period of 2 years after graduation or 5 years after diploma, the candidate is getting a practical knowledge, practical difficulties, and if he is going to face all these difficulties in that particular experience duration, then he can handle the boiler in a well manner. Then 34 is related to the subjects for examination. So there is a written examination of this boiler attendant, boiler operation engineers. So it consists of one paper on boilers to cover the syllabus stipulated under this sub rule A to sub rule H of rule number 32, and another paper on boilers to cover the syllabus stipulated under sub rule I to sub rule P of rule 32. A written drawing examination covering sub rule Q of rule 32. An oral examination to answer the questions pertaining to boilers, practices, and if required by the examiner to demonstrate in the examination room or in workshop his ability to carry out the practical aspects of his duties in a boiler house. So that candidate must have the different skills, especially the skill which is required for operating the boiler, and for that purpose only this oral examination or demonstration examination is there. If the examiner thinks that the candidate should go through the demonstration, then the candidate should pass this examination after the demonstration only. Then rule number 35 is related to the assessment of work. So whatever the written paper, whatever the oral examination, whatever the drawing examination, all these examinations or the papers are assessed by the examiners which is appointed by the government. Then rule number 36 is related to the fees for examinations. So for this written examination, drawing examination, oral examination, there is a fee that is rupees 1,500 in the 2000 area and shall be paid by the treasury challan. Then rule number 37 is related to the refund of fees. So once a candidate admitted to an examination under these rules, the fees shall not be refundable. Then rule number 30 is related to the fee for candidate found ineligible. So if a candidate who has paid the examination fee but found ineligible for examination shall forfeit the said fee. Then rule number 39 under the chapter 10, that is grant of certificates. So grant of certificates of proficiency. So if the candidate is going to pass that examination, then that state official gazette or union territory official gazette published, and the candidate who has passed the examination is listed out in that gazette, and they are going to have the certificate of that proficiency. Rule number 40 is related to the form of certificate. A certificate of proficiency as a boiler operation engineer shall be in form B. Then 41 is related to the application of endorsement on a certificate. An application for endorsement in a certificate for validity in a state or union territory other than the state or union territory of issue shall be made in form A. So application for endorsement is form A, and for certificate, that is form B. So these are the two forms for the endorsement and certificate. Then rule number 42 is related to the identification requirements. So every certificate granted under this rule bear a bust, photograph of the holder thereof previously submitted along with his application under rule 26, and his signature and such other particulars as may be required for the purpose of the identifications. So for the identification only, this sign photograph is required on this certificate. Then rule number 43 is related to the grant of duplicate certificate. So in case of the certificate is misplaced by the candidate, then he can apply for the duplicate certificate. The fees, that is 200 rupees, should be paid to the government, and then government will be issued a duplicate certificate, and the words duplicate certificate should be written on that such certificates. Then rule number 44 is related to the application for duplicate certificates. So the application for the duplicate certificate shall be lodged with the chairman and with a declaration before gazetted officer, and if it is found okay, then he can give the duplicate certificate. Rule number 45 is related to the invalidity of original certificate. If the duplicate certificate or on the issue of duplicate certificate, the original certificate shall cease to be valid and shall, if in the possession of the holder thereof, be returned to the office. So if he found after some time, after some days, the original certificate, then he can return the original certificate to the authority. Then rule number 46 is related to the record of duplicate certificate. So all the record of these duplicate certificate applications and issued to that candidate is managed by the government authorities and in the office of the chairman. Then rule number 47 is related to the enquiry regarding the certificate holders. So in case of district magistrate or chief inspector or director or some representatives of these boiler boards wants to know about the certificates, the conditions, or who is going to hold all these certificates, then these data can be given to these officers. Then rule number 48 is related to the surrender of certificates. So when an inquiry is being conducted under rule 47, the holder of such certificates on demand by the officers in charge of the inquiry forthwith surrender his certificate to the said officer pending the results of such inquiries. So if the inquiry is going on for a month or for 2 months, then that certificate is surrendered to that officer for that period only. Then rule number 49 is related to the decision on the board. So on the basis of these inquiries, on the basis of this verification by the board members related to these certificates, the decision can be made by these members and which is finalized by the chairman within the 30 days of the date of the receipt. Then appeal can be submitted to the government whose decision thereon shall be final. The 49 rules under these Boiler Regulation 1950, which is amended in 2011, is discussed. Now I will tell you about this form. Form A, that is with reference to rule number 26 and 41, application for certificate of proficiency as boiler operation engineer. So we have already discussed that photograph and sign is needed, and with that photograph and sign, name of that candidate, father's name, nationality, date of birth, place of birth, permanent address, whether appeared in any previous examination, if so, details of that date and place of that previous examination. So all the details should be filled by that applicant, that is by the candidate, in the form A. Then form B is with reference to the rule number 40 related to the certificate of proficiency as a boiler operation engineer under the Boiler Operations Engineers Rule 2011. So that particular number of that particular date, year, the name of that candidate, age, then present residing at particular address, having satisfied the board of examination appointed under this above noted rules, fulfill the boiler operation engineer. With reference to this boiler operation engineer's rule 2011, this certificate of proficiency is authorize him to be in charge of the boilers of any type or size, provided that all the boilers are stipulated situated within a radius of 50 meters, and this certificate is given at this particular date with this day and the year. So all these things are mentioned under this certificate of proficiency, and it is signed by the secretary of the board of examiners and the chairman of the board of examination. Then description role, the date and place of birth, permanent address, and photo should be attached on this form B. Then in the part 2, particulars of all these certificates submitted. The parameters are number of the certificates, class of certificates, place of issue, date of issue, if at any time suspended or cancelled, and if so, state by whom, date of suspension or cancellation, reasons for suspension or cancellation. So all the details which are related to the certificate suspension or cancellation is filled in this part 2. Then in the part 3, list of testimonials and statement of the services. So different parameters are involved under this table, that is serial number of testimonials, date of testimonials, name of persons signing the testimonials, address and designation of factory or workshop where employed, number, type and heating surfaces of boilers worked on, capacity in which employed, service of applicant, date of commencement, date of termination, period for which employed, the years, months, days, number not to be filled in the applicant, that is initial of the verifier, and remarks. So the eligibility, the qualification, the service period, the employer, all these details are verified by the verifier, and all these records are kept in this part 3. Then the other references where you can get the details of all these boiler sections and rules in Indian Boiler Act 1923, Indian Boiler Act 2007, Indian Boiler Act 2017, Indian Boiler Rules 1950, Boiler Attendant Rule 2011. So the different objectives and goals of all these acts and rules are there. So depending on your requirement, you can refer these different references. Thank you.